Hey everyone, my name is Nathan and welcome to Hail. Today's video comes to you with a year-long preparation behind it. I'm talking, of course, about the Peter Bogdanovich 52-week movie challenge. The challenge is exactly what it sounds like. You watch a movie each week of the year. The cool thing is anytime you finish a movie, you turn to the book and read about Peter Bogdanovich's review for the film as well as his experience with the film. I found out about this book and challenge in late 2021 and I knew right away that I wanted to do it. However, one of my concerns was, okay, well, what happens if I've already seen the movie and I don't feel like rewatching it just yet? Luckily, what he does is he recommends the movie, and then if you've already seen it, he has other suggestions. And so it's very flexible if you're going into the challenge with the same concerns that I had going into it. There was only 1 week of the entire challenge that I had to break the rules and not watch a movie that was strictly recommended by him. This was a week where an Orson Welles movie was recommended, and I had not only seen the movie that was recommended, but I had seen all of the movies that were alternatively recommended. I wasn't aching to rewatch any of these movies either, and so I literally just had to end up choosing a movie that had Orson Welles in it. So I watched Compulsion, which he never mentions in the challenge. So that's like the one movie of the challenge that he doesn't recommend, so I hope that he liked that one. I went into the challenge with about 50% of the challenge watched already, so I knew some movies would be rewatches and some would be alternates. Of the 52 movies, I'm going to show on the screen right now which movies I rewatched. There were some movies that I rewatched because I hadn't seen them in a very long time, and so it was very nice to rewatch them. And then there were other movies that I had seen just a year earlier or even a few months earlier, and I didn't feel like rewatching them so soon, and so I just chose the alternate. Today, what I hope to do is give you my thoughts on the challenge, whether or not I liked the challenge, if I would recommend it, as well as highlight some movies that I really enjoyed from the challenge and some that I didn't like as much as others. First off, I want to give a review of the book itself and just kind of how the challenge is laid out. The challenge is separated into 52 weeks, of course. He gives you the movie that he wants you to watch, and he purposely coincides with the time of year that you're watching it. And so every movie is chosen for a specific reason at that time of year. He doesn't just throw a list and be like, watch this whenever you want, just like make sure you watch by the end of the year. I will say going into the challenge, it is very easy to get behind. And so if you're thinking about doing this, make sure to stay on top of that. I started the challenge very strong and I was able to watch 1 movie a week. But when I hit about halfway through the year, it was around June to July, those summer months, I just got really behind. I ended up being several months behind, which sounds crazy. And I had to just kind of combine X amount of movies for November and December so that I can make sure I finished them by the end of the year. So I will say, going into the challenge, make sure that you're firm on when you watch the movies when he recommends them so that you don't have the same problem I did of catching up on them and watching like 20 Bogdanovich recommendations in 2 months. My only other con is this should come as no surprise, but the recommendations are very subjective, and so there were many cases where he recommended a movie and I just kind of hated myself. I was wondering, why am I doing this to myself? I don't like this movie at all. I can see why other people like it, but it's not my kind of movie. I'll share an image of the ones I really despised, but the biggest one that I just could not stand was The Miracle of Morgan's Creek, I think is what it's called. I could not stand the slapstick humor, the screwball comedy. It was not funny to me for 1 second. It was a chore to get through, and I was very happy when it ended. With that being said though, there were a lot of movies that were really good. To talk about the highlights is a little strange because there were a lot of movies that I watched the alternate option because I had already seen it and I didn't feel like rewatching it. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some highlights that were his original recommendation, the movies that I liked that were not the alternatives, give you an idea of what my favorites were, and we'll go from there. The first one comes from week 6. It is White Heat starring James Cagney. This is probably a really strange way of describing this movie, but it felt like The Dark Knight had it been made in the 1940s. There's a train robbery, there were characters purposely getting arrested, there was backstabbing left and right, there was maniacal laughing. I mean, a lot of the elements that we love about The Dark Knight, this movie had, and it was made in the 40s. So I really enjoyed this one. The Blue Angel was my first Emile Jennings film, and I enjoyed it a lot. It was a lot sadder than I was expecting, and I found myself a lot of the time screaming at the TV screen because I was frustrated with certain decisions that characters were making. I didn't really go into it with high expectations necessarily, but what it gave me was a story that I actually cared about, and I felt for the characters too. So for that, I enjoyed it. The next movie is from week 16 of the challenge. It is Grand Illusion. This was a really cool watch, especially because it is the first movie to hit the Criterion collection. So I was actually really looking forward to watching this one because it's something that I feel like everyone who is a fan of the Criterion collection wants to watch eventually. Prison escape movies are one of my favorite subgenre of film in general. They're very suspenseful and just exciting to watch. A lot of this movie takes place with the prisoners in the prisoner of war camp, but the scenes with the escapes are the most exciting, of course. Swing Time is from week 17, and I was pleasantly surprised with this movie. I'm not a big fan of Fred Astaire or so I thought. In every movie I'd seen him in up until Swing Time, I just didn't love his characters. They just kind of annoyed me. But in this one, I really liked him actually. Him and Ginger Rogers had amazing chemistry and the dancing was incredible. I was glued to the screen. I liked the music, I liked the dancing, I liked the story. It was a fun watch. Not only was it one of my favorites from the Bogdanovich challenge, it's also one of my favorite Criterion watches of the year. Steamboat Bill Jr. was from week 21. It was another welcomed watch because I'm a big fan of Buster Keaton. I've never seen a movie that I dislike of his, and so you can imagine I was pretty excited to watch another one of his silent films. The best part of the movie without a doubt was the storm sequence, especially with the house falling on him and the window frame perfectly going through him. I even knew about that shot before seeing this movie, so I was happy when I saw the movie and saw that scene. It's Buster Keaton, you can't really go wrong. Week 31 had me watching Rome Open City. Now, I was a little hesitant about this watch because I had seen movies from the director before and I wasn't a big fan of them, but Rome Open City actually pleasantly surprised me. I was very invested in the story, a lot more so than I thought I would be. It's a story that takes place during World War II, the Holocaust, Third Reich taking over Rome in 1944. Very intense stuff, and it does not hold back either. You see characters getting tortured, you see characters dying, and for a black and white movie made in the 40s, this was a hard watch, but it stuck with me because of how well done it was. A New Leaf came from week 36, and this was a movie that I had never even heard of before this challenge. Both Walter Matthau and Elaine May are fun in it, but Elaine May was the standout for me personally. Not only had I never heard of the movie, I never heard of her as a director or an actress, and so she just really stood out to me overall from this movie. She plays a very klutzy character and just very oblivious. The movie also had a very dark sense of humor that I was not expecting. I guess I didn't know what I was expecting because I'd never heard of the movie. I laughed several times. It's a funny movie. The Palm Beach Story was week 40, and it's a movie that I've known about for years because it has such a distinct Criterion cover. So I've always seen it at the Criterion Collection sale when I go to Barnes & Noble. Watching this movie just reminded me how badly I just need to watch more Claudette Colbert films because she's such a stunning actress. She's good at what she does, and I haven't seen a lot of her, and so I really want to watch more of her in the years to come. I will say though that if you compare the beginning to the ending, it makes no sense at all. I'm still trying to understand how that makes sense, how it connects with each other. It doesn't make sense to me. I was more confused in this movie than I've been in some Christopher Nolan movies. And it shouldn't be like that. I don't think it's supposed to be like that, but they just don't explain a certain plot element, and so it was unexpected. It was weird. Week 44 started on Halloween night, and the watch was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the one from the 50s. I actually watched it on Halloween night, so it was a really good way to kind of end this season. I've seen the 70s version with Donald Sutherland, and both movies are very strong on their own, but I like this one probably a little bit more. I think that's just because of my biasness towards black and white films in general, but I also just like the characters and I like the way that things happen in this one. I like that they're kind of limited on what they can and can't show because of censorship and whatnot, and so I always am impressed with black and white movies that can still create a scary movie, especially with all the codes that they had to follow and whatnot. And finally, week 49 was The Merry Widow, directed by Ernst Lubitsch. This was a really fun movie to watch. It's a musical from the 30s, the early 30s, that I was not expecting to like nearly as much as I did. I had been in this slump of just catching up on the challenge and trying to watch. And so when I got to The Merry Widow, I kind of had that attitude. That's why I think I was so pleasantly surprised, because it was a movie that actually had characters I liked. It had catchy music. The dance numbers were very beautiful. But the best thing of it was it had that Ernst Lubitsch touch that people talk about. His humor just shows. You can just tell it's a movie made by him because of the jokes that are cracked and the directions the story goes. So there you have it, a few highlights from the challenge, the movies that I enjoyed that were recommended strictly by him. Now, there were other movies that I watched that were not recommended by him, but were recommended as an alternate pick. And so if you're interested in knowing about what other movies I watched, check out my list on Letterboxd. I have the whole entire challenge on display there. Now, the moment you've been waiting for, should you do this challenge, yes or no? I'm gonna say no.
What?
Honestly, you can do whatever you want, but the reason I lean more towards no is because of how subjective the challenge is, how it's solely just, this is one guy's opinion. And granted, it's Peter Bogdanovich. He's a movie director and actor, so he knows Hollywood really well. There were just too many times where the challenge felt more like a chore than it felt like an exciting thing to look forward to. If you do it, please let me know, because I'd love to hear about your journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the movies that you watch, as well as the excerpts you get from the book as well. Stay tuned for more videos coming this month where I review how 2022 was as a year overall. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.